be reading verses 1 through 11. Once again, you're welcome to take your own Bible or device. You can take a pew Bible from in front of you, or you can simply listen as I read the words for our New Testament reading and focus passage, which is Mark chapter 11, verses 1 through 11. When they were approaching Jerusalem at Bethphage and Bethany, near the Mount of Olives, he sent two of his disciples and said to them, "Go into the village ahead of you, and immediately as you enter it, you will find tied there a colt that has never been ridden. Untie it and bring it. If anyone says to you, 'Why are you doing this?' just say this, 'The Lord needs it, and we'll send it back here immediately.'" They went away and found a colt tied near a door outside of the street. As they were untying it, some of the bystanders said to them, "What are you doing untying the colt?" They told them that what Jesus had said, and they allowed them to take it. Then they brought the colt to Jesus and threw their cloaks on it, and he sat on it. Many people spread their cloaks on the road, and others spread leafy branches that they had cut in the fields. Then those who went ahead and those who followed were shouting, "Hosanna! Blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord. Blessed is the coming kingdom of our ancestor David. Hosanna in the highest heaven." Then he entered Jerusalem and went into the temple, and when he had looked around at everything, and it was already late, he went out to Bethany with the 12. So what you drive might say something about you. Yeah, your car, your van, your truck, your SUV, whatever it may be, it might say something about you. There is a humorous Men's Health article that I found was published last year that talked about what your car says about you. For instance, if you drive a Lincoln, you work in consulting or politics and live in a city. You really love steak and roast chicken, college football, and your religion. These are humorous, folks. You don't have to take them too seriously. You can laugh. Dodge. Anybody drive a Dodge? You don't want to admit it. You don't know what I'm talking about. Someone said no. It's good. You think of yourself as big-hearted. You prefer to wash your own car. You disagree with the belief that electric cars are the way of the future. You don't style your hair. You don't look after your health as much as you should. You like bacon, fried fish, NASCAR, dogs, and Subway. You're usually tuned into NCIS and the Discovery Channel, and you've probably seen George Strait in concert. When you shop for clothes, you opt for comfort over style. And then there's Chrysler. Compared to other drivers, you're more likely to think of yourself as dependable. There's a good chance you're older than 65, and you enjoy a good Waldorf salad or beef casserole. You also love going to the movies. Then there's Ford. You think of yourself as friendly but direct, and you work in building or in construction. You own a dog, you're either a Gen Xer or a baby boomer. You love football, beef jerky, and pumpkin pie, and you don't care much about looking young or feeling attractive. I didn't write these, by the way. You like getting your hands dirty gardening or fishing. You prefer to buy American, you shop at Walmart. And before we move on, I found another article from Complex magazine that had a similar article. And of course, we had to find Subaru because we live in Black Mountain. By the way, I'm convinced that half the city drives Subarus. There was just a quote, it wasn't even a description. It said, "Fred, if you wanted to garden yet, we have to make sure it's good to go before we leave for our hiking excursion." That's all it said for Subaru. But for some of us, cars really are just a function or an item to get from point A to point B, aren't they? You said that article's nice, but for me, my car that's really all it is. It's a tool for me to get somewhere that I can't walk to, or perhaps ride my bike to, or perhaps somewhere that public transportation won't take me. But there may be some truth to the notion that a car can say something about you. For instance, a car may say something of your personality. Depending on the color or the style, it might actually say something if you chose that color or style. It may say something about your lifestyle. For instance, if you drive a big, heavy truck, or if you drive a van or a minivan or a Prius or something along those lines, it may say something about you or your lifestyle or what's in your life or what you value. And your car may say something about your pocketbook. It may say something about how much money you have or how much money you don't have. It very well might even not give an indication of either of those things. It may more be a glimpse into your credit. Who knows? A car may tell us a little something about you, potentially what you value with your money, your time, your activity, or your lifestyle. Maybe what you find dependable or trustworthy in a car, maybe a brand that you like or don't like. Today we are together celebrating Palm Sunday, and we're also concluding this series of studying the spiritual disciplines with worship. And a part of our central focus for today is to examine closely what Jesus is writing and what that says about him. In the same way that your car might indicate something about you, the way that Jesus rides into Jerusalem says a whole lot about him. And in our worship, in this spiritual discipline of worship that we take part in right now as a church family, or that we take part in our lives when we seek to have a connection and give praise to God, we affirm several truths, a couple of which we affirm that the king riding on a donkey or a colt is worthy of our praise. And we affirm that our lifestyle is oriented towards the king that rides the donkey. And so we're going to look at a little more deeply at those claims today for this Palm Sunday, but also talking about what it means to worship as a discipline. What it means to intentionally take part in the act of worship, which is the final spiritual discipline we will be looking at. We look at today's scripture, and Jesus commands two of his disciples to go and pick up his brand new ride. Jesus is going to ride something new. He tells them to go find a donkey that has never been ridden before. And so the disciples go and they get that donkey and they bring it back to Jerusalem. And so of all the things Jesus, the Savior of the world, could have chosen to ride, he chose donkey. He chose donkey that's never been ridden before. And that actually says a little something about what's to come. Because when you ride an animal that has never been ridden before, it's kind of risky. You never know what might be coming down the road. I don't know if any of you have tried to ride a horse for the first time or for its first riding or any other animal, whatever it may be. I don't know what all you choose to ride. But it's kind of risky knowing that you're getting on an animal that has never been ridden before. And for Jesus to get on this donkey that has never been ridden means that in this act of riding into Jerusalem on a donkey that we do not know anything about, we also should anticipate that the events of the coming week are totally beyond our expectations and beyond our wildest dreams and beyond what we can expect. Because yes, as Christians who have lived through the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ, or at least we look back on it, we know what to expect, but if we put ourselves in the minds and in the place of those people who were with Jesus at the beginning of that Holy Week, we don't know what's about to come. Jesus is about to ride on a donkey that has never been ridden into the holy city. What could this mean? It means that Jesus is taking a risk. It means that Jesus is doing something unexpected that no one could ever see. But there is something very explicit, or maybe implicit, depending on how you look at it, about what Jesus does by riding this donkey into the city gates. You see, what Jesus is doing, riding this donkey in, is not entirely unheard of or unexpected for a king. In fact, scholars tell us that probably on the other side of the city, at the great big gates of the city, that the king or royalty would have ridden into Jerusalem through the gates on a horse that was adorned with all kinds of robes and jewels, and would have had servants around him. People would have been waving palm branches and throwing their coats on the ground for that king. That's how royalty rides into the city. And so Jesus, by riding a donkey, perhaps on the other side of town, into the city, while at the same time the king or some other royalty may have ridden in on the other side, was a very politically motivated act. For him to ride in on a donkey and have people worshiping him and saying, Hosanna, blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord, blessed is the coming kingdom of our ancestor David, Hosanna in the highest. Yes, it was a very subversive act, but it was also very explicit in saying a king is riding into the holy city, but not the king that you're accustomed to. Not the king you may have worshipped before. Not the king who you think may make the rules or own this world around us. It was Jesus who was the true King of Kings, saying he was the opposite of the earthly king that would have ridden in on the other side of town. Jesus is saying, if you're going to live in my kingdom, if you're going to worship me, if you're going to call me king, we're going to do things a little differently. And we're going to show you how in the next week. And so this first day of Holy Week, where Jesus rides into the city, is almost a call to attention. And boy, wouldn't it draw attention. Even those who didn't worship Jesus would have said, there was a guy riding in on the other side of town on a donkey, and people were praising him just like they did our king. We need to keep an eye on him while he's in town. We need to take notice of what's going on here. But there were people who risked it all to follow him. There are people who were ultimately saying, I'm not going to follow the way of Caesar and his royalty. We have a new king in town. We're going to worship him. We're going to give him our allegiance and our loyalty. They postured themselves to give their allegiance to the King of Kings. And I can promise you that those waving palm branches when Jesus entered the city weren't first out there waving palm branches at the principalities and powers known as Caesar, and then running to the back gate and saying, oh yeah, you too, Jesus. No, they laid aside the palm branches and their cloaks for Caesar and said no more. But they took up the palms and their coats and laid them out and waved them at the King of Kings and Lord of Lords and said, this is our new kingdom. This is the kingdom we're going to live into. This is our way of life. This is our future. This is our eternity. And so the people postured themselves as such. In a sense, it may have been the first people acting in the spiritual discipline of worshiping Jesus as King. Waving those palm branches, taking up those palm branches almost as an act of obedience to Christ, but also as an act of obedience, an act of protest to the world around them. It was risky, that first Palm Sunday act of worship. They were making a statement that Jesus is to be praised, and that could certainly bring some trouble down the road for them. But they were also choosing to show in their worship and to take part that it is Jesus who would reorient their lives and not the principalities and powers of the world. So today on this Palm Sunday, as we talk about the spiritual act of worship, we are reminded that worship is voluntary. No one makes you worship. In the same way that you might choose to fast or you might choose to pray, the same way that you might choose to meditate on the Scriptures, in the same way that you might choose to practice solitude, in the same way that you might choose to practice silence as a spiritual act, worship is also a choice. You must choose to give your attention and attentiveness to God, to Christ, and to the Spirit. It is truly a discipline to choose to worship, whether corporately in a place such as this or on your own. And so when we practice this spiritual discipline of worship, we're going to take on the character of those people who met Jesus at the gates of the holy city so long ago. As we choose to worship, we are choosing to take up our palm branches. We are choosing to lay down our cloaks at the foot of Jesus as he rides in on the donkey, and we are affirming the statement that Jesus is making while riding into the city on that donkey. And so here's what we are going to do. We are going to follow Christ in that same subversive, upside-down approach to building the kingdom. It's not going to come because of our violence and power from the top down. It's going to come from us here on the ground level, the grassroots. When we worship the one who rides a donkey in the back of the city, we acknowledge that we're proceeding in this life in a different sort of way than the world around us. When we practice this discipline of worship, this lifestyle of worship, we don't go to the gate for Caesar and then when it's convenient go back to welcome Jesus into our lives. We give Jesus our full attention and our full allegiance. We're going to serve as agents of love and compassion in this kingdom. We're not going to allow partisan politics to dictate our morals and values. We're not going to allow violent and oppressive power to be our way in the world. And instead of, as a church, propping up the principalities and the powers of this world, we're going to seek out the least of these among us and offer grace and love and compassion. But the first step we must take is to welcome Jesus into our own lives, to allow Jesus to ride in and to take part in our cities and our kingdoms that we like to manage and to control. Like Jesus riding into Jerusalem, we must also allow Jesus to ride into our lives and to shake us up. We must allow Jesus to ride into our lives and do things unexpectedly in our lives in the same way that he unexpectedly saved the world during that Holy Week. We must allow Jesus and posture ourselves to celebrate his journey into our cities, into our churches, into our schools, into our places of work, and into our communities. We must celebrate and anticipate the ruckus he's going to cause in our lives, the ways he's going to shake us from our comforts. You see, Jesus doesn't enter Jerusalem as a mere formality. Jesus' entrance into Jerusalem is his first step into a changed world. When we worship, when we take part in that spiritual act of worship, and we expect it to be more than lip service or routine, but we expect lives to be changed. Jesus rides into our lives. Jesus rides into our churches. When we allow that to happen, when we make the proclamation that Jesus has come into our church, when we make the proclamation that Jesus is Lord of Lords and King of Kings, and that we submit to him fully, and that he has the totality of our allegiance, people in our sin should turn an eye. They should turn their head and look at us and say, there's something about the way those people ride. There's something about the way those people get around. There's something about their style. There's something about the way they travel, the way they move. There's something about the neighborhoods they choose to go into that says something about their values. There's something about the way they speak to one another and speak to us that says something about the love in their hearts. And we believe in faith that because we are obedient to Christ, and that kind of love and grace and compassion is changing the world and renewing the world around us, that when the world truly sees this love and grace and compassion, they will want to be a part of it. And so we have a Holy Week to celebrate. We have the coming week to share with others and to make explicit what it means to be a Christ follower. We have next week to share with people what it means to worship the King of Kings. We have the next week to share with people and to celebrate and to affirm our love for one another and to take the Lord's Supper together this Thursday. To show what it means to be a people unified by the love of Christ. We have an opportunity on Friday, when people hear this term Good Friday, to explain what that means and why on earth we would even call it something like Good Friday. And then 1 week from today, we have the opportunity to share with people the meaning of the empty tomb. And what it means that the world around us is bursting forth into new life and that new creation is coming forth in our communities. And you are a part of it. And so my challenge to you today, beginning today, allow Jesus to ride into your lives. Allow Jesus to ride in, to affirm the Savior that rides in on the donkey, subversively speaking out and protesting the principalities and powers of this world, and allow grace and love and compassion to be the rule of the kingdom, to be a rule of your kingdom, because we follow the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Let's be a part of the building of God's kingdom this week as we prepare for Resurrection Sunday.